Thanks to our second son being gone, we have the chance to meet like this again." The words I heard from my room were far from appropriate for a real parent, my husband. I could feel my heart growing cold at the crude laughter intermingled in the conversation between my husband and our eldest son's wife. Even a normally mild-mannered eldest son, who was watching the screen next to me, was trembling quietly in anger. "When they come back, we need to have a proper discussion." Yes, I would like to hear their excuses. As relatives were gathering, it was rather convenient that they had prepared incontrovertible evidence against themselves. By this point, everyone present was on my and our eldest son's side. Together with their various relatives, we were eagerly awaiting the return of the two who were soon to be on the hot seat. My name is Catherine. I am turning 64 this year. I raised two sons and thought I had built a very ordinary family. I had only recently learned that such common happiness could easily crumble. I was in deep grief after losing my second son in a car accident. Why did Mike have to be in an accident? How long are you going to keep moaning about what's already happened? Despite our son leaving this world due to an unexpected accident, my husband threw such cold words at me. Seeing my husband without a single tear, even though the funeral was coming up, I felt my heart grow colder. At the signal from our eldest son coming to pick us up, I heard a car horn from outside. I put the pet cat in the cage and headed towards the entrance. "I never thought Mike would leave us so soon." "You too, Tyler. You're both a miserable lot, father and son." "Isn't it natural? Rather, why do you seem so unfazed?" "You're planning to send Mike off with a smile, aren't you, father-in-law?" "That's right. That's exactly what I mean." Even in the car, my husband's attitude remained unchanged, laughing out loud. Our eldest son's wife also looked at him, smiling. Even in normal times, these two often say things that are quite provocative without any hesitation. Normally, I would let it slide since I understood their personalities from long-term association, but today I couldn't. It was unbearable to think of the feelings of our eldest son, who was fond of his younger brother, hearing such heartless words from his own father and even his wife. I slapped my husband's knee, who was sitting next to me, to point it out. "Enough. Despite the family tragedy, I can't believe you can laugh like that." "Ouch. Are you telling me to put on a face that looks like it's about to grow mold?" "I'm asking you to have some decency. You're not a child. Don't speak so loud at the funeral." Yeah. You're always a nagging wife, no matter how old you get." Not being able to resist answering back to my words, my husband grumbled childishly, appearing irritated. Feeling the tension in the car atmosphere, I sighed, looking out of the window, thinking it was pointless to talk any further. I understood, as my husband said, that it's not necessarily good to cry on more. That's why I believed what we could do was simply to send off our second son quietly, hoping for his peaceful rest. Despite my only wish being that, these two wouldn't even allow it, and were about to cause an unthinkable incident. I greeted my relatives whom I hadn't seen for a while at the venue, chatting about old times with those who had loved my second son and made the effort. To come from afar, tears naturally flowed again. "This whole situation is really uncomfortable." "Mike was such a sweet and good boy. It feels like he just became an adult." "Thank you for your concern." Every time our second son's name was mentioned, I bowed deeply and expressed my gratitude. Ignoring me, my husband seemed unrepentant even about his attitude in the car, and was chatting loudly about golf and other fun things with a relative he hadn't seen in a while. "How about it? Would you like to go out and play together next time?" "Kyle, isn't today your son's funeral?" "I'm not saying we should go out today, right? That would be downright bad luck." "How many times do I have to tell you to stop before you're satisfied?" In my quiet but firm voice, I scolded my husband, who only seemed to think about himself. I felt like I was reprimanding an unruly child. Seemingly irritated at being admonished yet again, my husband sullenly showed his disgruntlement, dismissively gesturing with one hand. I questioned if he really understood what day it was today. With my husband's attitude evoking such doubt, I wondered when things had gotten to this point, a crease forming between my brows. Had he gone insane from the shock of our second son's departure from this world? Speaking of Jessica, has been doing the same thing. She compares me and Dad every time we talk at home. Is that so? My first son's words sent a shiver of unease through my heart. I wanted to believe that there was some reason behind my husband's behavior, perhaps stubbornness from growing older, but Tyler's disheartening words caused me to involuntarily glance at the two of them. Despite being quieter than before, they seemed cheerful, continuously grinning as they chatted. Seeing this, I shook my head. You're right, these do seem too close. Right, but Dad's 65. He wouldn't get any weird ideas about his son's wife. Yes, you're right. With their age gap, he wouldn't do something so disgraceful. As we shared a small, half-hearted laugh, we continued our conversation. Perhaps we were both silently hoping, reassuring each other that it was that case. Regardless of our anxieties, the pair continued to chat away happily. When I went to the restroom during the funeral, I saw my husband headed toward the exit. Following him, I found Jessica by his side, about to step outside. Hey, where are you two going? Huh? Oh, it's you. Jessica said she wasn't feeling well, so I thought I'd let her get some fresh air. I see. Are you okay, Jessica? Yes, I think I'll be okay if I just rest a bit. After watching the pair go outside, I returned to my seat and whispered to Tyler. He seemed unaware of my ill health and was visibly surprised when he learned they had gone outside. Oh, so that's why he borrowed the car keys. By car? Where could they have gone? He might have been considerate of me, given my condition. It must have been hard for him to bring it up. Pointing at his eyes, now swollen from crying, the eldest son said so. Could those two be thinking of being considerate? Even though I thought this was a bit far-fetched, I accepted it at the moment and didn't dwell on it further. However, as the two of them didn't return, even when it was time for the meal after the funeral, our faces started to cloud over with a bad premonition. What happened? No good. I tried calling them, but I couldn't reach either of them. Well, I hope nothing serious happened. The eldest son tried calling them, but it seems he couldn't reach either of them. I also sent them a text, but there was no reply. The eldest son's car hadn't returned either, and each time a relative asked about their whereabouts, we were at a loss for words. Was she feeling that bad? Maybe they went to the hospital. If that's the case, I think they should have at least contacted us. They're not pets. They'll come home eventually. Pet? Oh, I wonder how our cat is doing. While chatting with the relatives, I suddenly remembered our pet cat left at home alone. Taking out my smartphone, I activated the pet camera to check on it, and for some reason, the cat was out of its cage and someone's voice could be heard. Huh? Hearing the unexpected voice, I initially thought a burglar had broken in, and my blood ran cold. However, the voice that casually picked up our pet cat, when listened to carefully, was one we were very familiar with. Jessica, and isn't that Dad's voice too? What does that mean? Are they back at our house? I exchanged glances with my eldest son and then stared at the screen in confusion. When I increased the volume coming from the smartphone, an unthinkable conversation could be heard. The kitty is so cute. Can't we take it back with us? What's the point in keeping such an old cat? I'll get you a cuter kitten. Yay! I love you, father-in-law. Just as I heard this sickly sweet voice, the edge of my bed, visible on the screen, shook, and a creaking sound was heard. With my mind going blank, I just quietly listened to the two's conversation. Taking advantage of the fact that no one else was listening, the two were freely exchanging cruel words about me, our eldest son, and their second son. I really struggle with formal ceremonies like that. My nagging wife lacks class too, always on my case. She really scolded you, poor Kyle. Right, but thanks to our second son being gone, we got another chance to meet like this. Following those inconsiderate words from a supposed parent, the crass laughter echoed. I felt a cold sensation in my chest. Next to me, our usually mild-mannered eldest son seemed to be quietly shaking with rage. That's awful. Is that something a father should say? Maybe it's better not to think of him as a father anymore. Surpassing both anger and disbelief, my mind was eerily quiet. When I looked up, the relatives gathered at the dining table were chatting at their leisure. I could no longer think of anything, so I turned the volume of my smartphone to the maximum and drew everyone's attention. Hey, what on earth is she doing? Sneaking out of the funeral and doing such things with his son's wife. So even her sickness was a lie. Did he go to such lengths just to be alone with her? Turning up the volume, the unusual conversation of the two silenced all chatter, and everyone's eyes were fixed on me. The somber mood disappeared somewhere, and everyone stared at the small smartphone screen until the nonsensical conversation between the two ended. "If there's another unfortunate accident, I can come to see you again. Maybe it will be Tyler next time." "Before that, it's gotta be my nagging wife, right? With her age, it should happen pretty soon." All the relatives were shocked by the two who, far from mourning the misfortune of the second son, was joking about making a promise for the next meeting. There was a deep gasp, and no one spoke until their conversation ended. After letting the relatives see the entire conversation and actions of the two, I closed my smartphone just as we started discussing whether to return to the venue. Everyone's hearts seemed united in anger at the two whom trampled on our family. "When they come back, we need to have a serious talk. Yes, I'd like to hear what kind of excuses they have." By now, everyone there was on the side of me and my eldest son. Along with the trembling relatives, we waited for the return of the two, who would soon find themselves walking on a bed of needles. They returned about 15 minutes later, taking about the same amount of time it takes to get from our house to the funeral hall. I looked at the two with contempt, realizing that they had been having such a conversation in my room until just now. "We're back. Why the long faces, everyone?" "Welcome back. I wonder where you've been. I was worried because you were late." "I told you before, didn't I, that Jessica wasn't feeling well, so we stepped outside." "Oh, Jessica, are you feeling better now?" "Yes, I'm perfectly fine now. I'm sorry for worrying you." I encouraged my daughter-in-law, who is waving at me with a frivolous smile, to sit across from me. I sigh as I look at my husband, who naturally takes a seat next to her. As soon as they sit down, all the relatives turn towards us at once. I started asking them questions one by one, as the two looked uncomfortable and a bit surprised. "What have you been doing all this time?" "We were out there until Jessica felt better." "Out there?" "In a family restaurant." "Really? Then where's the receipt?" "What are you suspecting me of all this time?" My husband was the first to raise his voice at my pointed questions. Glaring at me with a sour look on his face, he said as if he had no reason to be suspected. However, having heard their conversation just a moment ago, I had no hesitation left in me. "Did you really spend all this time at a family restaurant?" "That's what I've been saying. I threw away the receipt." "Then what did you eat? How about you, Jessica?" "Mother-in-law, isn't that too harsh? What on earth do you think we've done?" At my daughter-in-law's words, my face twitched and I was at loss for words. She covered her mouth with her hand and spoke as if she were about to cry. Who was the cruel one here? I wanted to scream at her to think about it with her hand on her own heart. Taking a deep breath with the relatives watching, I pointed at the sleeve of her clothing, ready to deliver the final blow to the two who continued to play dumb. "Oh, Jessica, there's some cat hair on your sleeve. Whose is it, I wonder?" This is that." "It's probably the stray cat's."
"Yes, it must have struck when I saw and petted it earlier."
"That's not it, isn't it? That's supposed to be our cat's hair. It got stuck now, didn't it?" I take out my smartphone and launch the pet camera app that I had been using earlier. It's convenient since the app also has a recording feature. I show the playback of my daughter-in-law lifting her cat right before their eyes. Then I replay the disgraceful conversation the two had been having all this time, at a volume in the same place. Finally, understanding the meaning of the cold stares from the relatives, their faces instantly turned pale.
"You knew everything and put on this charade?"
"Yes, it was funny how you two kept playing dumb."
"You're terrible, mother-in-law. This is an invasion of privacy."
I don't want to hear that from someone who went into someone else's room and enjoyed themselves with someone else's husband. When they found out their lie had been exposed, they began yelling like children. I kept my cool and consistently pointed out their misconduct. The one who finally reached their limit was the eldest son due to their lack of guilt. He slammed the table vigorously and began to accuse the two with a stern, low voice. "How dare you two do something so disrespectful during a family funeral?"
"No, it's just that mother-in-law trapped us."
"What do you mean, no? Everything you two said was overheard here." At the eldest son's words, the relatives around them nodded in agreement. No one here would defend the two who had blurted out that they hoped for an accidental incident to happen to me or my eldest son just so they could meet alone. When I pointed this out, the two who finally understood the meaning of the surrounding gaze glared at my eldest son with annoyance. Hey, did you purposely prepare all this to hang us out? Not at all, just a coincidence. I was just trying to check on our cat Ash, and you two just happened to be in the frame.
Even so, it's cruel to reveal it to everyone in a place like this.
I know, I never thought there would be people who would do such a thing in a place like this. Plus, I'm supposedly a terrible wife, right? While repeating my husband's word, I glanced at him. Perhaps realizing he was in the wrong, my husband stopped defending my daughter-in-law and fell silent. My daughter-in-law also tried to escape by pretending to cry and hurling insults at me, but no one was willing to lend her an ear. That's enough. I can't continue being a family with someone who can do something like this so easily.
What? You're saying we're getting a divorce?
Obviously. Tyler said this quietly to the final quiet Jessica. She tries to make excuses again in a panic, but Tyler no longer pays her any attention. I cough to get the attention of my husband, who is trying to console Jessica by patting her shoulder, as if it's someone else's problem. Do you think you're not involved? Paul? On the day we're saying goodbye to our son, you managed to do something like this and even tell outrageous lies, and you haven't even apologized until now. I'm sorry. It's fine. I don't need an apology, that's only on the surface. We should also get a divorce. My words made my husband turn pale instantly. How could he think that he would be fine? My husband, who has never taken care of his surroundings properly, will probably struggle if there's no one to take care of him. I turned my back on my husband, who was making excuses and apologizing, and I opened the door of the room. I don't want people who are about to become strangers to stay here any longer. Please leave. I'll need the car keys back. The daughter-in-law was looking at my husband with a troubled face, but there was nothing more he could do. Encouraged by the relatives, the two of them went outside with their heads down. I'll introduce you to the lawyer at our company. My son is a police officer. Call him any time if anything happens. They were truly shameless at the younger son's funeral, so that they could hear the relatives gave us reassuring words at the back of the two being driven out. With nowhere to turn, after the funeral we had the two stamp the divorce papers. Afterward, the former daughter-in-law supposedly went to her real parents for consolation when discussing alimony during the divorce. She seemed to have tried her best to portray herself as pitiful as she was then, but of course her parents were completely put off. I heard she is now working a part-time job day and night to pay the alimony. As for my ex-husband, he had apparently been pouring his savings into the former daughter-in-law and had even dipped into his own savings. He asked to give our house to me as a form of alimony, and I asked him to leave the house without a penny to his name. And so the house became mine as a substitute for alimony from my ex-husband. However, especially in my room where there were unpleasant memories of my ex-husband and the former daughter-in-law, I couldn't possibly continue to live in. So I decided to sell the house and move to a pet-friendly apartment. Now without the disrespectful ex-husband, I'm living a leisurely life with my pet cat Ash. It seems that I was more stressed out by my ex-husband than I thought, and living alone, doing whatever I want with my cat, is much more comfortable than before. After the divorce, my son occasionally comes to visit. My son also seems to be able to live a calm life after the divorce, and he told me that he's doing better than before. Recently, there's also good news. He told me that he's about to get a promotion at work. We decided to go out to eat to celebrate, but we happened to run into my ex-husband. He was completely different from before, looking like a quiet old man with the hunched shoulders. He was so different from the time he used to give us a hard time. I wouldn't have known it was my ex-husband at first glance. He didn't have any spirit in his eyes and approached me with a surprised look after he saw us. Hey, there was someone else living in our house. What's going on? Our house? It's certainly not your house anymore. Did you sell it? How could you do that? My ex-husband raised his voice at me in his old manner with a hoarse voice. He might have gone to the house he used to live in. I don't know whether he wanted to get the house back or was planning to coax me into forgiving him, but looking at his current attitude, I still couldn't think that he was remorseful. Locking my son, who was glaring at him, I said to the worn-out him, "After all, I can't sleep in a room where my husband and daughter-in-law were getting along. I don't need such a house." As I said that dismissively, my ex-husband had a look as if he came to his senses, quickly turned on his heel and left. Had he already forgotten what he had done? It felt like he had put a damper on our celebration, but we picked ourselves up and started walking on a sunny afternoon again.